Hey everybody, how's it going? We're going to do a quick video on setting up for TPU. So if you've got a CR-10, if you've got a Ender 2, Ender 3, whatever the Creality variants are, you can use some of these settings in Ideamaker to get started with TPU if you haven't already. I have my CR-10 set up to set up to print TPU. So if you are running stock, I'll show you both ways. If you're running stock, there's going to be a couple different things that you're not going to want to do here. But if you really want to have some good success, I would recommend you print something first and modify your printer very slightly. It's a very easy modification, but it makes all the difference in the world printing TPU. So before we do anything else, why don't we talk into that? So if you go over to Thingiverse, and you look at this thing here, 2214-4227, or just type in flexible filament extruder for Creality, this guy pops up. This is a very simple print. You can print this out in probably less than an hour, and what it does is it gives you it replaces your current sort of extruder bracket here, but what it does is it allows you to put in this extra little piece of PTFE tube. And what you do is you cut that down to a point, and that basically gets right in between your gear and your idle bearing. And so what's happening, and the reason why you want to do this is this allows you to use retraction while printing TPU. If you don't have this modification, you can still print TPU, no problem. You want to turn retraction off and be prepared for some additional stringing that you wouldn't normally have. Again, my recommendation would be to go with this. It's a very simple modification. You undo a couple of screws, you pull the old one off, you put the new one on, you rethread your PTFE coupling here, you put in your PTFE tube that you cut, and you're all set. And I glued mine in place. I super glued mine in place. It's a pretty tight fit, but I like to super glue it anyway just to make sure it doesn't move around. But I've had this on the same one on my, or same variation at least on my CR-10 for the last couple of years, doing this specifically so I can print TPU, and it's great. You can leave it on. You don't have to do anything else for PLA, or you don't have to take it off. You can just leave it on. It's a full-time modification. So for me, that's a must-have. So the caveat being is when we're in talking about the Ideamaker settings, if you don't have a setup similar to this or this one, turn retraction off. Okay. So there we go. So one of the things I like to print with TPU, which is kind of nice, are these little multi-purpose straps. So this flexible multi-purpose strap, Ninja Flex, it's 835257 on Thingiverse. There's lots of different sizes. There's a couple of different styles. But if you've got a roll of TPU hanging around and you want something useful to print with it, these are great. I've printed a bunch of these, and they're great for lots of different things. But they're nice because they stretch depending on which TPU you get, and then they're nice and solid. So those are the two things I really like to print with TPU. And if you really want to do sort of a stress test with your TPU, go grab this hand model, or any hand model, off of Thingiverse. And then you can have a hand that you can squeeze and move around. And I had a big one, and I freaking put it on my desk with a middle finger on it back at the office. So, but that's a good stress test because definitely if there's stringing in between fingers, right, it gives you a chance to sort of make sure that your layers, or that you're going slow enough, you're getting good layer adhesion, and you can reduce the stringing as much as possible, type of thing. So that's a good torture test. So let's jump into the settings here. So I've got a separate flex template that I use. So we're just going to start with that. Now again, I use 0.6 nozzle. Doesn't really matter. These settings will be a good starting point regardless of if you're running a 0.4, 0.6, 0.8, any of that good stuff. So on that strap, it's 100% infill. You're not going to do any percentage other than 100% on those straps. Now on the hand, you can do whatever you want. You can even get away with 0 infill and do 3 walls. You can do 10%, whatever you want. So nothing really changes here. You don't need to do a brim. I do a skirt just to prime the nozzle, but TPU will not lift like PLA or PETG or ABS will. It'll, once it once it lays down on the bed, it's staying down on the bed till you peel it off. It does not. That's one of the nice things, is it ain't gonna move around much. So why don't we just jump straight in here? Now this particular one, this template I was printing at 0.12 layer height. Doesn't matter. I would say normally I would print it at like a 0.2 layer height. For whatever reason, I was printing at 0.12, but either way is fine. And I was doing a maximum shell overlap of 50%. I wanted to make sure all the walls that were getting laid down, there was at least a half overlay, so that all of those walls, since I was printing 3 walls, were nice and stuck together and there wasn't any separation. TPU tends to run a little bit thinner than PLA or PETG, so it would run, if you measured it out, probably around the 1.6, 1.65. So I accounted for that in the shell overlap. You can do that with, you can also change your flow rate. You can calibrate your E-steps specific to rolling out TPU if you want, but typically you're going to up your flow rate just a hair with TPU. It tends to run a bit thin. First layer height was 0.2. Again, every first layer I do is 0.2. That way I don't have to tram my bed at a different height. Everything I start with is a 0.2. Makes it easy. First layer speed 20% or 20 millimeters per second. TPU you want to print slow. You are asking for trouble. Now look, everybody's got their own settings, but you're asking for trouble pushing TPU, let's say above 30 or 40 millimeters a second. So you print slow. So you can see my default print speed is 25, 25, and 20 for the outer shell. The X and Y and the Z axis movement still go fairly fast because that helps with reducing stringing, right? If you snap off the line and move the head across as fast as possible, then that'll reduce stringing. None of the rest of the stuff really matters. Your layer start and stops are up to you. For TPU, I don't like the head to move around that much because it does have more stringing than other ones, so I just say give me the nearest layer start point. Unless it's really important to you to have a Z-seam hidden somewhere like on a corner or in the back, just do nearest. It'll help reduce some stringing. The only other suggestion I can make is say nearest, but then also throw it on a reflex or convex corner if you want to. Again, for these couple of prints, I didn't do it. And on the extruder, nothing really changes here. I did up my coasting distance a bit since TPU likes to ooze a bit more, so I added a little extra tenth on the coasting to a 0.3. Extrusion width stays the same. Now again, I'm enabling retraction because I have the modified extruder. If you don't have that modified extruder, turn this off. That would be my recommendation. No real changes in infill. That all stuff stays the same as far as bottom, top layers. Infill density, again, that's dealer's choice. I run all the speeds slow, so even infill speed, I run it slow at 25 millimeters, and I do an infill overlap of 25%. But that's really no different than my PLA or PETG setup anyway. No supports with either of these models. In fact, if you can avoid supports printing TPU, do that. They just become fused to the model. It's a very different material than PLA. Cooling, I run no cooling on TPU. So you could probably get away with something nominal, like maybe 20-30% fan if you did have some light bridging you needed to do. But in general, cooling will just probably promote poor layer adhesion. So if you can get it, stay away from it, then I would not use any cooling. And I do a minimum print layer time of 20 seconds. You could up this to 25 or 30 if you really wanted to, if you're doing small parts, just to give it time to cool off. My temperature, so for my TPU, so I use a lot of inland TPU, and I find it prints really nice around 210, 215. I've noticed with TPU, if you're running it too hot, you will hear it pop. And I know in PLA that's an indication of moisture in the filament. With TPU, since it's a different chemistry material, I find when I'm running it too hot, it is popping. So when I dial it back, say 5 or 10 degrees from where I hear the popping, it goes down really nice and it gets really good layer adhesion. But if it's popping, you're going to be under extruding all day long. Nothing under advanced. Oh, except for the override filament settings. So I did up this by 10%, right? So normally I would have this unchecked and it would just run at 100%. In this case for TPU, I'm upping this by 10% to account again for the thinness of TPU. For ooze, I'm doing a force retraction on layer change. And I'm not really doing anything else other than saying, avoid traveling through holes. So this would help reduce some stringing. This will help keep the nozzle inside the already printed model. It does not 100% keep it there, but it will help avoid some stringing. And then depending on your model, you might want to merge. I don't do thin walls and I don't do fill gaps. Remember, this fill gaps and shells, it is trying to deposit and fill up every tiny little spot of gap in your shells you have, which will promote additional nozzle travel and give you a whole lot of stringing if you're not careful. So if you can avoid it with TPU, don't have this stuff checked. And then nothing on G-code. So there you go. And now if we go slice this, you're not going to really see much. It's going to look like the normal slice. But some of those settings are really important, especially on the hand, on the fingers of the hand. So what happened? I screwed it up. Start. Sorry, one more time here. Come on. There we go. Preview it. Print times are going to be a lot longer because you're running slow. But overall, the strap is really cool. It comes really, like I said, it's a very useful print. The hand is more of a novelty item and more of a torture test. In fact, you can print it a lot smaller than this if you really want to. The key thing to look at here is that wherever your Z-seam is or wherever your nozzle is changing layers, is that you've got a good fully formed layer change. You don't have any gaps. You don't have any under extrusion where that's happening. And if you've got Z-hop turned off, then you will reduce some of the stringing that will happen in between fingers. If you have Z-hop turned on, remember the nozzle is going to be coming around, and as it stops at that layer, it's going to stop and it's going to lift slightly, pulling some melted filament with it, and then pulling that over to the next finger and doing it. And that's where a lot of the stringing comes from, is in that Z-hop. So unless we're talking about like top layers, like on something flat or on the bottom, I typically try and leave Z-hop turned off. So there you go. So there's TPU settings. I don't have anything. I wish I had some TPU stuff in front of me here, but I don't. But it's a cool material. It's kind of fun. I would not plan on it, say, like replacing any of your PLA or PETG from like your normal day-to-day printing stuff. But if you have specialty type parts to do, like straps, things that you absolutely have to have flexible, it's a great material. It's a lot of fun to mess with. So there you go. Hopefully that helps you out, and we'll do another one soon. Thanks a lot.